So I included that line at the end of the MGS4 review at the expense of this game. Not really sure what to expect when I replayed Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker, originally released on the PSP in the year 2010, but remastered alongside Metal Gear 1, 2, Sons of Liberty, and Snake Eater as a part of the Metal Gear Solid HD collection in 2011. Since I played Portable Ops on an emulator with 60 FPS and dual analog, we're obviously going to do the same for Peace Walker. Unlike Acid or Portable Ops, Hideo Kojima played a prominent role in Peace Walker's production, Konami of course wanting more Metal Gear sequels, but MGS4 closed off any potential continuation of Solid Snake's story, so there was Raiden. We can get to him in the next video. So that means that the perennial dead horse Big Boss is going out on another mission set in the 1970s. This time we're furthering Big Boss's path down to the dark side, with the base development and staff gameplay from Portable Ops getting a significantly higher focus as the classic tactical espionage action is replaced with tactical espionage operations. There was also an emphasis on this game being the first co-op Metal Gear game, which trust me, we'll get to. The Metal Gear franchise jumped the shark in Metal Gear Solid 4 when we found out that the radio cast from MGS3 was responsible for the massive government conspiracies from MGS2, and from there it just kept getting worse with the fan service continuously scarfed down our throats. If the video already sounds cynical, well, it is. My first time through, I enjoyed Peace Walker so little that it took me almost 2 years to bother finishing it. Guns of the Patriots left behind a mess of confusing, ill-advised plot points, and Peace Walker only adds to the pile. I don't like Peace Walker. Do I hate everything the game does? No, but that doesn't really matter since my overall opinion of this game is negative. So if you don't like that, I'm urging you to just walk away now. Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker takes place in the year 1974, placing these events 21 years before Solid Snake enters Outer Heaven, 10 years after Naked Snake kills the boss, and 4 years after Naked Snake stops Gene's uprising in San Geronimo. But trust me, this game desperately wants you to think that this is not the case. The game opens with a recap telling us that in 1964, the legendary hero, the boss, had defected to the Soviet Union, and the USA got framed for the nuclear explosion in a Soviet research facility, meaning that the USA had to prove its innocence. The only means was sending Naked Snake, the boss's greatest student, to assassinate her in Groznygrad. But then it says Snake was ranked Big Boss and never appeared again until now. Peace Walker takes a lot of pride in being the definitive Snake Eater sequel, so much so that even as someone who has MGS3 said it his favorite game, I was sick of hearing about it by the end. The game desperately wants you to think Portable Ops never happened, and quickly throws a potshot at the very beginning before ceasing to acknowledge its existence. But ignoring Ops entirely, after that game and before this game, Big Boss worked alongside his friends to establish the Patriots, but again, we can't have pesky continuity in our Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker. So Big Boss is stationed at the shores of Colombia leading MSF, which translates to Soldiers Without Borders, since that's what he wants for society. So Big Boss and company exist here on the beach and in some wooden shacks, since it's not like they have the money to really build MSF up. However, Snake did get a microfilm from Gene that he used to build Army's Heaven, and this was implied to be the Outer Heaven funds, but one of the arguments that I have heard is that Peace Walker showing MSF with no money clearly means that the whole scene with Gene at the end of Portable Ops is non-canon. Even though the contradicting evidence does not come from the previous games, it comes from this game, which means that this game is causing the continuity discrepancy. Snake is aided by McDonald Miller.
Snake, this is McDonald Miller. It's been a long time.
What's going on, Kaz?
Huh? Snake is aided by Kazuhiro Miller from Metal Gear 2, or Kaz for short. I actually really like Kaz in this game. He was a character that was very underdeveloped since his most major moment of screen time was Metal Gear Solid, but as we all know, that was Liquid doing an impersonation. And speaking of impersonations, Kaz is voiced by Robin Atkin Downes, who's been in every Metal Gear prequel, since he was the guy who directed Snake's landing in Snake Eater and was Jonathan in Portable Ops. The Johnny I liked. But yeah, Robin Atkin Downes is doing a similar voice to and younger sounding than the impression Liquid did in MGS1, which is funny how that works out. In all seriousness, the performance is very believable, and Kaz is written really well. As someone who played the Phantom Pain before touching this game, I was surprised to see Miller be the team's optimist, but that gives him a charming quality that characters like Big Boss or Amanda don't have, since he's always trying to think of ways to grow MSF in legitimate and positive ways, which makes him someone you'd be glad to have as mission backup. I think for consistency, Miller should have been the one in the place of Campbell in Portable Ops, since as I said, Miller didn't have much of a pre-established character to distract from, so why not? Which is why Peace Walker does that very thing. I mean, if Miller was in Portable Ops, that would make this garbage line make all the more sense.
Finally, we can leave all that crap in San Geronimo behind.
Yeah, that was hilarious. Would have been funnier if the story we were en route to see was a little better, but speaking of which, what is the story of Peace Walker? So as I was saying, it's 1974, Cold War tensions are as high as ever as an organized group of soldiers takes over Costa Rica unopposed, since Costa Rica has no army to defend themselves against foreign invaders. For that reason, Professor of Peace, Professor Galvez, has barely escaped with his student Paz in order to request the aid of MSF to drive out the army in Costa Rica with the promise of Big Boss and crew getting a big offshore oil rig as a new base. Big Boss questions Galvez's identity, but on a recording Galvez brought, Snake can hear the voice of the boss, and this, alongside Paz's plight about peace, prompts Snake to give the mission a shot. Along the way, he meets Amanda, her group of soldiers, and her younger brother Chico, who joined the ranks of MSF. The group occupying Costa Rica is led by Hot Coldman, as it's revealed that they're an ex-CIA group with nuclear weapons in their new mech, Peace Walker, which is controlled by an AI without human interference, as well as having a host of AI bots on their side for Snake to tangle with. The reason Peace Walker's nukes are controlled by an AI is because Coldman and company believe that the nuclear deterrence theory is not actually applicable and want to use Peace Walker as a test to prove its capability in destroying the enemy if human beings are too weak to do it themselves in the face of a nuclear attack. Leading the development is Dr. Strangelove, and formerly Huey Emmerich, who was saved by Big Boss and joins MSF. We know that the Peace Walker AI is based on the boss, and Dr. Strangelove designed it that way since she worked with the boss herself and greatly admired her, and can't believe she just defected out of the blue and then got killed by Snake, calling it a day, which is a natural conclusion since there has to be more to the story than that, and now she wants Snake to fill in the blanks. So, there are some cool elements in this story, like how Paz's identity is called into question when they rescue her friend who says that she's never met Paz before, and I think questioning nuclear deterrence is a good idea for an MGS storyline since the series has been about the eradication of nuclear war and how inherently good people don't have that potential in them since the very beginning. However, Peace Walker's story is my least favorite in the entire Metal Gear series from a character standpoint, continuity, and thematically. So let's explore why that is. Well, one more thing I like first. I like how morally dubious Big Boss is in this game. It should be reminded that though we're playing a game in the midst of Big Boss's transition into villainy, we relate to his perspective as the protagonist and thus sympathize with his decisions. This starts with the marketing, as images of Snake from Peace Walker show half of his face in the shadows and the other half in the light. This carries on into Ground Zeroes, but Big Boss's dialogue show that this guy is flawed on a moral level, like how by the end he and Kaz are talking about using nukes of their own to upset the balance of deterrence, or how he demands Miller release Amanda from the sickbay because her true calling is on the battlefield. Chico and Paz are employed as part of your mother base spreadsheets despite Chico already being a child and them believing that Paz was. Stuff like this is really interesting. Though Peace Walker tends to put it all on the back burner since the rest of the story is just white noise, unless they're trying to ruin MGS3, then the life really comes back to the game. So let's get into the juicy stuff that made you click on this terrible video to begin with. I wasn't sure if this was a compliment or not, but the answer is mixed. Peace Walker is one of the funnier Metal Gear games, whether it be Snake trying to find Chico through these tiny windows in the doors and you can come across some interesting results, or the part where Snake is trying to track down the truck where the nukes are being stored and finds literal metal gears.
Metal Gear?
Or the truck next to it with Mr. Kojima.
Mr. Kojima?
Or a lot of the interactions we hear about Miller having on Mother Base, or the fact that Big Boss believes in Santa Claus.
Listen to me. Every December they set up a hotline and... Okay, I get it. He's real, I tell ya.
And all of these examples are legitimately funny, which is a step up from MGS4, which is not funny in the slightest. In general, Peace Walker is one of the lightest games in the series when it comes to the content. After all, this was the very first and only mainline MGS game to get a T rating over the usual M. But this all leads to a massive tonal whiplash throughout the game. Just go back to the story summary from just a moment ago. This game is about deterrence theory and whether or not human beings can be trusted to initiate a launch when the need arises. That's a loaded topic from all angles, but it doesn't feel that important since there are also an abundance of comedic moments. Just listen to this dialogue between Snake and Miller halfway through the game.
Snake, I'm worried.
Worried?
For the same reason the CIA entrusted the nuclear launch to an AI. A man can condemn a handful of criminals to the death penalty if they're prepared to assume that responsibility. But who among us could do the same to hundreds of millions of innocent civilians? Who could reduce thousands of years of human history to ash in an instant? Could any flesh and blood human being make that decision? No way in hell. No one man could bear the burden of total genocide.
There is literally a scene after the Peace Walker boss fight where the guys of the Pentagon are literally thinking the world is about to end but are too afraid to retaliate, but the end of the world is coming from a giant robot dog screeching in the boss's voice. To say that previous Metal Gear games never had moments of levity is blatantly wrong. I mean, Metal Gear Solid 2 and 3 especially were loaded with goofy moments. I'm not sure what it is about Peace Walker in this regard that doesn't work as well, but I think it's just the two tonal poles don't blend well this time. It's the same issue that the Twin Snakes suffered from if you look at the story seriously when playing that game. MGS1's themes of nuclear abolishment, non-violence, genetic destiny, and all that stuff is lost in the mix of a game about over-the-top action flips. But for the 444th time, Twin Snakes is a great game, however I completely ignore the story since all the meat is in MGS1, but as a non-canon action-heavy retelling, the game got the job done. But of course, in Peace Walker, we're dealing with what's supposed to be the next Metal Gear game after Guns of the Patriots, and the tonal mismatch definitely doesn't go unnoticed, to say the absolute least. On the subject of thematic impact, this doesn't bode well for Peace Walker either. I've always thought that the one-word theme idea for each Metal Gear Solid became a cliche rather than an effective descriptor of the story, as in, there were many things to take out of the stories of MGS 1 through 4 beyond one word to begin with, but god damn, this game has the weakest thematic word in the entire franchise. Peace. Why is this the theme of Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker? Peace, you ask? I have no idea. The only guess I have is that they talk about peace at length, because Paz's name means peace, she wants Big Boss and crew to bring peace back to Costa Rica, Professor Galvez is the professor of peace, the greatest soldier fights in the name of peace, Coldman wants to bring peace to this world by using Peace Walker to show they can fire the nukes without hesitation, and then there will be peace. I mean, geez, if the theme of an MGS game was decided by how many times people say that word in the game, then full stop, the theme of this game would be scientist.
I'm a scientist, an AI developer, but not an AI myself. I'm a scientist, and as a scientist, I find this distasteful. You understand? I am a scientist, and I expect answers that make sense.
In all seriousness, a theme is something that runs deep in the story and ties the plot and the characters together in personality and motivation, and I've covered the themes of MGS 1 through 3 in my reviews of those games. However, I did a bit of a disservice to the Sense theme in MGS 4. I still think responsibility is a strong theme for MGS4, however sense works great as well since that's an element in the story. That once someone is gone, their senses, their beliefs can go with them. If anything, the fact that both of these work for MGS4 says something about the themes as a literary concept, but anyway, I'm sure somebody called me out for my coverage of that in my MGS4 review since I'm writing this before that came out, so I'm unsure of that at this moment, but it's YouTube, do you have to ask? In the interest of fairness, I decided to read through the MGS Wiki's article on themes in the MGS games to see if it could highlight any additional facets to the story I didn't notice myself, and even the wiki had no clue. Like, look at the screen. I didn't Photoshop this. I didn't edit the page. This should tell all that Peace Walker's story has nothing to really say, which is not a problem. Metal Gear 1, 2, and Portable Ops don't have one-word themes, but they're still stories nonetheless. But my problem is that Peace Walker is pretending to have something to say through the one-word theme. Peace Walker ultimately goes through the Metal Gear tropes without doing anything with them, turning them into meaningless cliches. Also, as a salty Ops fanboy, can I ask a question? One of the reasons I've been told that Portable Ops is not canon is because Snake works with a younger Roy Campbell, however, this connection was never mentioned to Solid Snake during Metal Gear 2, Metal Gear Solid, or Metal Gear Solid 4. This evidence is purely anecdotal though, since nothing said that didn't happen in the above games, it just didn't come up. I mean, it's totally possible that Big Boss had Campbell working at Foxhound before the Outer Heaven mission since they were friends back in San Geronimo, and when Big Boss went into hiding after that, Campbell stepped up as the leader of Foxhound. I mean, this line of logic could be applied to Peace Walker and why Miller worked at Foxhound, but regardless, people cannot accept Portable Ops as canon because of something that happened that wasn't mentioned in the other games but not actively contradicted. However, we can totally accept the fact that Huey Emmerich worked with Big Boss on Mother Base? Like, are you kidding me? That is literally the coincidence to end all coincidences that Solid Snake and Otacon's fathers had worked together on MSF and Diamond Dogs. This is what I hate so much about the post-Portable Ops Metal Gear series. The idea that the whole franchise is some pre-planned Destiny routine with the prequels and sequels mirroring each other.
Again, it's like poetry, so if they rhyme. Every stanza kind of rhymes with the last one.
Oh yeah, just like that! Oh, nothing contradicts Big Boss working with Huey, it's just the second largest pill to swallow in the history of the Metal Gear franchise, especially when the story of Peace Walker in particular gets nothing out of his appearance. He's just a guy with Otacon's voice, although come to think of it, why do they have the same voice? Okay, Big Boss and Solid Snake are the same genetically, although that doesn't explain why Liquid and Solidus sound nothing like any voice of Big Boss, but whatever. Huey is Otacon's actual father. This just doesn't work like that, what else can I say? I like Snake and Otacon's friendship because of how unlikely it was, thus making it all the stronger. These are all the things I've said before, but Peace Walker just doesn't see it the way I do. And if that's how it's going to be, then I'm just going to safely ignore the game. I mean, the game's events are never mentioned in Metal Gear Solid 4, and I know what you're thinking. Well, duh, Metal Gear Solid 4 predates Peace Walker, you fucking dummy. Yeah, I mean, we all know why the events of Peace Walker, Ground Zeroes, and the Phantom Pain never get referenced in Guns of the Patriots, but it's nonetheless jarring that such big events happen in the Metal Gear series that never got mentioned. Big Mama's speech to Solid Snake about all the things that really happened in the series from Portable Ops to the present day interestingly skipped straight from Les Enfants Terribles to Metal Gear 1, and you'd think she would mention MSF, you know, that time Big Boss saved the world from nuclear annihilation at the hands of Peace Walker and such, but it's not. I know why, but it makes the last 3 prequels feel out of place in the overall canon. Also, Big Boss is like 39 in Peace Walker, the game takes place in 1974, and the cloning project was in 1972. But
Big Boss was in his late 50s when they created his copies.
Yep. That is definitely a thing. A big thing in this game is the nature of AI robots, and I only now realize that maybe what the game was getting at here was that this was some kind of prototype for the AIs the Patriots had in Metal Gear Solid 2, but to that I must say, no. What did I say in Metal Gear Solid 4? That the twist in Third Son was so bad that we had to spend the rest of the series justifying it. Well, here we are. All of this originates from the terrible ideas of MGS4, and now we need more prequels to clean up the mess that game left behind. But from a sheer logic point of view, can you honestly tell me that the boss fights in this game make any sense? They don't! Look at the timeline! In Metal Gear Solid 3, the high-tech nuclear weapon was a body with drills on it, which, as I said in the Snake Eater, would have been destroyed if Metal Gear Ray just stepped on the damn thing. In this universe's 1995, Metal Gear TX-55 couldn't even move by itself without a pilot, and this was true for Metal Gear D and Metal Gear Rex. I realized that the only reason that Raiden was able to beat an army of Metal Gear Rays was because they were unmanned and controlled by a computer, but the system was unperfected and they were mass-produced, so they were clunky and weak in comparison to one of them being piloted by a human being. So with all that knowledge in mind, you want me to believe that back in the frickin' 1970s, we had flying AI robots that literally dodged rockets like the Matrix. Not just one, but several. One the size of an entire battleship, but on wheels. The series has to keep topping itself with the robots, but it fails to work with the established place in the timeline. Reasons like this are why I hate Peace Walker's story. But let us first cover the end plot twist. So Professor Galvez was in fact not who he claimed to be, and his real name was Zadornov. He escapes from Mother Base captivity several times over, giving Snake the distraction needed as Paz hijacks Metal Gear Zeke, the weapon that MSF developed from the scraps of the boss fights. It turns out that Paz was pretending to be a 16-year-old peace student alongside Zadornov to infiltrate MSF, so she's working for both the KGB and the CIA. But in another shocking twist, she's working for Cypher. Who? Okay, so Cypher is a group started by Major Zero, and Paz is basically here to spy on Big Boss and potentially get him back to the Patriots, but that's obviously not gonna happen. This scene might last a few minutes, but I really don't feel like anything of substance was gathered from this. Paz claims that Major Zero and Big Boss took the boss's will the wrong way and are showing it in 2 different ways. I mean, didn't we already know this back in Guns of the Patriots? That was the point of the 1 to 100 speech at the end, right? I thought it made sense that Big Boss said all of this stuff in hindsight, but here Paz is in the midst of Big Boss's descent into villainy, preaching the conclusion of the series to him. Also, what I was saying earlier is confirmed, since Paz also informs that Cypher, or just Major Zero, wants to have AIs ruling over the world when human beings aren't capable themselves, and that they want to control guns, and so on. Basically, MGS 2 and 4 were long set up. But if you played this series in chronological order, can you really look at me in the eyes and tell me that this feels like a natural series of events? No! Paz just sounds like a crazy person talking about ideas that have nothing to do with the story. It is just taking ideas from later in the timeline and setting it up to make this prequel feel more important when it's really not. But in the end, Paz goes flying into the ocean as Big Boss and Kaz realize that this is just the beginning of the adversity MSF will face.
So what happens to us now? We'll be hunted.
And this part is off the script, but I will just add that after beating Metal Gear Z, you get a second credit sequence where you then get another after credit sequence, the true after credit sequence of Peace Walker. The first one is where Big Boss rejects the identity of Naked Snake and just becomes Big Boss. But the second one is really interesting to discuss. Basically, it's after the events of the game where Big Boss is addressing MSF in a speech where he talks about what MSF is going to be in the future, and he just sounds like a complete madman. Like, Big Boss, I think it's fair to say that by the end of Peace Walker, Big Boss is fully committed towards his path of craziness, for lack of a better phrase, that we see by Metal Gear 2. David Hayter does an absolutely fantastic job in this scene. Like, he just really sells the fact that this is a man with, like, no moral compass, but he is selling himself to, or he's convincing his men, like, endearing himself to his men about his case anyway, and they're all down with it. It's an absolutely fantastic scene. It's actually my favorite scene in Peace Walker's story, even if it's just the end credits scene with no image display, it's just the game's logo.
We will sometimes have to sell ourselves and services. If the times demand it, we'll be revolutionaries, criminals, terrorists, and yes, we may all be headed straight to hell. But what better place for us than this? It is our only home, our heaven, and our hell. This is utter heaven.
But really though, everything about Peace Walker's story builds up to this final point. Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker's biggest writing problem is the fact that the story leeches off of MGS3 so badly to the point where the actual story of Peace Walker falls flat on its face. At first, I was going to complain about Snake's character in this game since the rundown is that Snake is in total denial over what happened to the boss in MGS3. This is in and of itself a contrived sequel setup where the original story didn't need it. Remember back to my review of MGS3. That ending scene is one of the best I had ever witnessed because of how much it's said without words, since Snake himself even said nothing throughout the entire ending. We just see him salute the grave while Eva's monologue plays in the background. Looking back on it, Eva was a double agent all along, so maybe that is cause for disbelief, but we know Big Boss has seen Eva before striking out on his own for MSF. He could have just asked some follow-up questions. But yeah, Snake cannot believe what Eva said about the boss, since that might also be a cover-up story. However, at the end of the day, I just realized that it isn't really what Snake says and does that bothers me. It's just the premise of Big Boss living in denial of the boss's death that I just don't find engaging, since as I've hammered in, MGS3 didn't need this extra appendage to function. But Peace Walker, on the other hand, relies so heavily on Snake Eater that it's almost pathetic. Sure, the story of MGS2 could not exist without the story of MGS1, however, it's like I said in the last video, you actually have to make points while doing this. The very premise is one I don't like, but it of course only gets worse from there. So correct me if I'm wrong, but Snake is remembering the events of MGS3 incorrectly, right? We have to sit through these cringy QTE cutscenes where Snake thinks back to the dialogue between him and the boss in the final battle of MGS3. However, the dialogue is wrong, listed from various points during Snake Eater, including "I'm defecting to the Soviet Union." You know, what she said at the very beginning of the game? You'd think Snake would know that by the point of the final boss. Being the fan of MGS3 that I am, I just don't feel serviced by this. I feel pissed off. Imagine for a moment that you were playing an MGS game and someone walked in on you playing it with no context. If it was Snake Eater, or really any MGS game besides Peace Walker, I would have no problem, but at times this game is just so cringeworthy, and a lot of that comes from MGS3's story expansion. Like how these AIs have the boss's voice, and we must listen to the boss echo the same lines from MGS3 at an ear-piercing volume with a horrific filter over it for a minute straight.
I'm not your boss anymore. Go home. Why did you come back? Go home. I'm not your boss anymore. Go home. You better stay alive from now on. Go home. I'm not your boss anymore. Go home. Go home. I'm not your boss anymore. Go home.
As part of Strangelove's research, she found the boss's horse, and Snake rides this horse into battle, prominently during this absolutely ridiculous chase scene with gameplay straight out of the Atari 2600. The horse gets injured, and of course, Snake must put the horse out of its misery by, I can't believe I'm saying this, shooting it just like he did the boss. Oh yeah, how poetic. Oh yeah, it is poetic, just like the reuse of the salute for the 544th time, since people loved that, right? Since Snake now doesn't care what happened in MGS3, the boss laid down her gun, and he shall never do it. It all leads to the final nail in the boss's coffin. And no, I don't mean Peace Walker drowning itself for peace, I mean the Metal Gear series. The boss was a hero dealt a poor hand and saw it through to the end like a true hero, causing Big Boss to turn into the villain we saw later in the timeline. We've had Portable Ops, we've had Guns of the Patriots, and now Peace Walker. I've continued to hammer in the fact that it could have just ended there, but we learned about the stupid idea that the boss's entire defection was a plan to get rid of her from the start, with MGS4 confirming it, and oh yeah, the fucking mustache twirler behind MGS3 was a guy named Hot Coldman, casually revealed in the middle of a scene. You've got to be joking with this. That is all I can really say at all. Is this a joke? It sure feels like one. So I hope the writers enjoyed dumping all over a great story, because I'm left baffled as a Metal Gear fan and I'm supposed to take this absolute trash seriously. Yeah, Hot Coldman. I just don't care. I refuse to let this rubbish take away from MGS3 in my eyes, even if the writers really wanted it to. This is what I was getting at with MGS4. From Third Sons onward, I am just completely tuned out as the people behind this series have no idea what's going on. They're just tossing more retcons, tossing more fate and destiny to it to sound all grandiose. MGS4 jumped the shark, and Peace Walker just keeps on digging deeper and deeper into the ground afterwards. This game's new story content is bland and lacking in thematic depth, and the MGS3 shit is terrible. So I'm left to conclude that Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker is just a terrible story, and by far the worst Metal Gear Solid plot I have had the displeasure of looking at, since just thinking about it makes me bored and miserable. The 2D comic book cutscenes have returned, and I do like how they try to put more motion and camera work into these to make them feel like more stylized cutscenes than a cheap alternative. Although the drawings themselves still vary in quality and detail. I don't like the pass or fail QTE events in any cutscene they appear in, since it's just a cheap gimmick. Like, I'm trying to pay attention, but I have to keep listening to the same lines over and over again to get the QTE correctly. In all other aspects of the presentation, what do you want me to say? I mean, it's a PSP game. As far as those go, I think it's one of the better looking releases on the console, although it was a late release game, so you'd kinda hope that would be. The HD edition cleans that up and runs at a smooth 60 frames per second with textures that hold up pretty well when blown up to HD proportions. That's worthy of credit. I love whenever the game uses 3D models in the cutscenes though, especially when they do close-ups on Snake. It's absolutely hilarious, since Snake has this unintentionally comedic, disinterested face on 24/7, it just kills me. The soundtrack didn't really do it for me, since like Snake Eater, the outside gameplay is met with ambience, but the various alert themes and boss themes just kind of fade into the gunfire as you forget it in 20 seconds. But if you want some fantastic exceptions, look no further than the not-so-final boss fight against Peace Walker. It really feels triumphant as you destroy the thing. I don't like it being on loop for 30 minutes, but that's a different conversation. Peace Walker also marks the series debut of Donna Burke as the vocalist of Heaven's Divide, the main theme of the game. I could never figure out if this song was about Strangelove and the Boss, Big Boss and the Boss, or somebody else, but the lyrics are really good and the instrumentals leave a strong impact, and Burke's singing ability is good. Although I don't like Heaven's Divide nearly as much as Snake Eater or Calling to the Night, since Burke sounds really auto-tuned in this one. I'm sure all MGS vocal themes are, but the strange sound she has throughout the song was probably intentional, since that's not how she sounds in Sins of the Father from the Phantom Pain, so therefore Heaven's Divide just isn't my cup of tea on that front, but I really like it. So how does Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker play? In this aspect, the game is fine, I guess. First and foremost, I really like the new CQC animations. It's endlessly satisfying to grab a guy and just slam him into the wall from behind. It just makes me feel like we're getting closer and closer to CQC being what the devs envisioned from the Snake Eater title screen. Another new feature is Snake's ability to chain CQC slams when there are multiple enemies around, and this is also extremely cool to watch, albeit not taking much skill to actually do. The gameplay is pretty much the same as MGS4 with the third-person shooting and such, which is impressive since this was on a PSP, but what I will instead focus on is the fact that MGS4 already cut great mechanics from this series like tactical reloads and all the cool tricks from MGS3, but for some baffling reason, Peace Walker continues this trend. In MGS4, it was the stuff a nitpicky fan like me would notice and care about. However, right from the start of the game, we find out that Snake can no longer crawl on the ground. Like, what? Why? This has been a series tradition since Metal Gear 2 for the MSX. What happens is that Snake crouches down and then lays flat on the ground. Moving the analog stick at all during this period results in the camera panning around Snake, which is another source of confusion. So we can turn the camera around, but we can't crawl? I have no idea what to really analyze about this. It's just a perplexing omission. Plain and simple. An area where this does do some harm is one of my favorite tactics in this series from Metal Gear Solid 2 to Metal Gear Solid 4. You know, rolling and then holding down onto the X button to send Snake instantly into the crawling position. It was a great tactic to pick up the pace of the game. But now we can't do this in Peace Walker. So instead you'll roll, wait for the animation to complete, then crouch, then lay down. What a load of absolute hooey. What makes this worse is the fact that obviously tactical reloads are still gone, clip capacity is really limited, and bosses come flying at you. So be stuck reloading your guns at a painfully slow speed. When you need to lay flat and not to get run over, you can't while reloading and you just get hit. I do like how by pressing down on the D-pad, Snake can go from standing to crouching. It did become my go-to method since stopping then crouching was way too slow for me. But at the end of the day, I must ask why the good stuff from the previous games was cut. It just pisses me off since the rest of the game already isn't that great. MGS4 introduced third-person aiming to the series, however, I like how you can just still switch between first-person and third-person shooting with the press of a button. As I said last time, first-person shooting is my preference, and I am glad MGS4 gives players the choice. Peace Walker does no such thing. Aiming in Peace Walker is still perfectly functional since it's not like I can't play a TPS if I were made to, it's just that that bit of accuracy is lost in the transition. Oh, also, why can Snake only carry 2 weapons at a time? Snake Eater started this trend of having a limited amount of equipment you could carry at a given time, which Portable Ops and Guns of the Patriots also did, but they also let you decide what you were going to have out at any given time. It adds freedom to a more restricted system than the previous games. In Peace Walker, you can only carry 2 weapons during a mission, and then you can carry items like a supply drop or grenades. This game will tell you when you need something like C4 towards the beginning, however, I don't understand what the point of the restriction is then. You can't access all your equipment at once in this game like in MGS3 and 4, and unlike Portable Ops, you can't bring multiple soldiers with their own arsenal into any mission during single players, so you just need to pick wisely before starting a mission, which isn't that hard since missions are extremely short, so you just grab a trank for a quick sneaking mission, and then whatever you can for a boss. Later you can access the Battleware, which increases the number of weapons to 3, but still only that. Camouflage also suffers from restriction in this game. In Snake Eater, in any given situation, you can switch your camo to fit the environment. Where Snake keeps all these different uniforms and how he switches to them in the middle of the hallway is unknown to me, but it works for the gameplay. With MGS4 taking place in the distant future, we can make use of that with Octo Camo, a fantastic system with a wide variety of textures as Snake could blend with literally anything in the game. Since this game is a prequel, we're limited again since we can't take the gameplay from MGS4 forward without breaking the timeline. So what they did instead is changing camo is in the mission select, going off of a blurry image of what the area looks like with some letter grades for that camo's efficiency in different environment types. So they downgraded it from Snake Eater, needless to say. I didn't take camo very seriously in this game, so I just picked what looked cool and went with that. I made it along without any issues arising from that, which should speak as to the quality of the system. Now to change the pace for a quick second, let's talk about something I like. Metal Gear Solid 4 gave us a million different guns and a practically never-ending supply of ammo and third-person shooting. So stealth stopped being a priority for me in the middle of Chapter 2 since I might as well play around with my whole toolbox and I haven't even come close to seeing it all. Peace Walker's still a third-person shooter like I said, but the developers found a way to counteract the massive amount of supplies. Similar to Portable Ops, Snake is running a military group, but this time it's a massive company with their own currency and their own flag and their own identity and home base, meaning that the process is much more streamlined with a legitimate R&D team, intel team, combat unit, and so on. You have to keep recruiting people to MSF or else the group will start to suffer, like you need to keep the mess hall up to date or else the amount of food will deplete. You need to manage your R&D funds, since without that you'll go into debt, and all rewards from missions and outer ops go to that. To recruit people, the laborious truck method from portable ops has been replaced with the Fulton extraction. Just go up to somebody who's knocked out, strap a balloon on his back, and watch him fly. Even if there's a ceiling above him. Yeah, no comment. Since you need to keep Mother Base on the rise at all times, this prioritizes non-lethal gameplay, making it needed to keep your trank on you for all stealth missions. I also like how this game makes an actual war economy, since MGS4 would tell you all about it, but in Peace Walker you have to manage funds, you have to weigh the risks and rewards of sending your soldiers out on missions. I mean, it's all there for an extremely in-depth system rewarding devoted playing time, however, it's just not my cup of tea when it comes to MGS. The same could be said about Portable Ops, but my enjoyment from that game especially came from the core gameplay and the story rather than expanding my crew. In Ops, this stuff was just kinda clumsy, but in Peace Walker it is really focused on. But in Ops, I oddly kind of appreciated how you didn't need to focus on this aspect of the game if you really didn't want to, even if that undermines the point of the system entirely. This works in Peace Walker's favor if you like the game, however I think the story's trash and the gameplay isn't much better for me, so when the whole game is based around devoted playing time in a game I already don't like, this presents a conflict for me as Peace Walker just fades into the white noise after a while. As if I wasn't already against the mechanics I love from the 6th gen games being gone, the actual content in this game just leaves me bored. The level design in Peace Walker is vapid, to say the least. Most of the levels take place in very linear hallways, with my favorite areas being the ones where you have to get around the guards in more open rooms like the Peace Walker hangar, or the parts where you have to escape captivity, as these areas have a good atmosphere and level design. But the outdoor areas like the challenge or good enemy placement at Snake Eater, or even the best of Guns That Patriots had. What I mean is that it's all too easy to just walk into a new room of enemies, land some headshots, and that's it. It just gets really boring really fast. Besides that, there are several moments of clear padding, like the temple area. You need to make your way to the temple, only to find that the key doesn't work, go all the way back to the previous boss fight, then all the way back to the door. Or the final area, go all the way to the communications room, then all the way back to the middle, then forward. It's just so monotonous. Missions are also extremely short since it's on a handheld, requiring smaller play sessions, and to compensate for this, the late game missions have no checkpoints, so you need to redo the same sections over and over and over again during combat. But as bad as this is, it doesn't even hold a candle when compared to the game's boss fights. This is one of the things I hated the absolute most about Peace Walker my first playthrough, and this time around as well. Every boss in Peace Walker is the textbook definition of a bullet sponge. You can bring your rockets, you can bring your grenades, assault rifles, the works, but it's all meaningless in the face of these indestructible AI battleship-sized tanks from 1974. Clip after clip, just shooting, listening to the same obnoxious music. Despite these massive targets, the camera does not focus on them at all, making it so that you need to track them while they are flying around the area, but they move so fast you can barely get a hit in. No, auto-aim doesn't help there either, I tried. You could just say wait for the enemy to stop and allow you to shoot, but the only kink in that armor is that the boss fight takes even longer when they do that. The average runtime for me being about 20 to 30 minutes each, which is just insanity. Supply markers aren't much help either, since they only refill half of the supplies you'd need as opposed to a full amount of ammo and rations, which is just an extra headache to deal with. Also, gotta love how I had like 2 rations, got ran over, lost my health, both rations got used, and the damage was so great that I still died. Oops, my bad. This made me wonder, is it any better on co-op? I mean, Peace Walker was marketed on its Monster Hunter-esque co-op missions, so I might as well give it a shot. I basically played the back half of the game on co-op, and to be quite honest, the experience didn't really improve that drastically. I mean, it drew enemy fire away from me at certain points, and at first produced many a laugh during the absolutely abysmal Cocoon boss fight. We spent a full hour on this abomination as we continued shooting the AI head, but seemingly inflicted no damage, as the first half of the boss is just a padded out war of attrition. But the part that will kick your ass will be the ending climb where you reach the top and try to finish it off. But with the missiles and the cannons, you will quickly lose rations and die again and again. You could take out the cannons, but most of those are bullet sponges too, and so why waste the ammo you need for the boss itself? Again, on co-op it was certainly funnier to suffer through, but the experience was suffering nonetheless, with my cohort even witnessing me being shot at by an enemy that was behind cover in the final enemy rush. I didn't see this myself, but I trust him. Making this pain and suffering end only takes one thing: grinding. As if the game forcing you to play the same stages over and over wasn't bad enough already, beating these bosses takes more weapons and better supply markers and so on, which takes a higher R&D rating, which takes more man-hours of grinding for soldiers. We literally reached the boss fight with Peace Walker, and we were there for half an hour before we just ran out of ammo. I had no supply markers left, and so we just had to quit.
You haven't got a chance now. You need to pull back and stock up on supplies.
And then we spent a literal hour and a half grinding so my friend could get more soldiers, build himself a supply marker, and some rocket launchers. I don't care how much stronger you will be after the grind. What matters is that I, under no circumstances, will ever feel accomplished playing a game where I just spent over an hour playing the same content again and again. It's just not fun. You could just say, well, why didn't he have a rocket launcher? Well, the reason is because I asked him to play with me just to test out the multiplayer and serve as an extra body during boss fights, but this turned into playing most of the game together, ultimately not knowing we wouldn't be able to finish the final boss with just my equipment. No Metal Gear boss worth its salt would allow this. All it took in each and every game was the sheer skill you as the player brought in, which defines the best moments of Metal Gear Solid and video games as a whole. And if Peace Walker wants to put a wall behind winning because lol, sorry boss, you don't have the ammo for that, then the game can just right off. The only Metal Gear boss this could happen during was the final boss of Metal Gear 1. But guess what, folks? This is not 1987, it is 2010. So yeah, we grinded, we beat the final boss, and was the glorious ending worth it? No, I hate the plot of this game anyway. After, it's met with more grinding to complete Metal Gear Zeke, only for that to be the true final boss after going back to the same areas countless times to track down Zadornov and just, ugh. I'm just gonna sum it up with this side op. It's called Date with Paz. Miller thinks Paz is getting cooped up in Mother Base, and so Snake takes her to the beach to see the sunset. But the objective of the mission is to get Paz inside the love box with Snake. While Paz is actually an adult, Big Boss and crew think she's 16. And spoiler alert, he's 39! Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker is a game that I hate. Metal Gear Solid is my favorite franchise in the history of video games. I could just sing its praises to the ends of time. But Peace Walker, let's just make this clear. I think Peace Walker, full stop, is the absolute worst Metal Gear Solid game of all time. I enjoy something about every Metal Gear Solid game, but Peace Walker is a case where the list is just so small that it doesn't even matter. The gameplay is boring and repetitive, all in the name of making the MSF management good. But this comes at the cost of the pacing and the mission structure. The bosses were all some of the least interesting and most padded I've ever seen. But worst of all, the story is a never-ending leech off of MGS3, adding more twists onto that game to bolster this one, when in reality, this story adds nothing of real value to the series, answering questions nobody asked and having nothing to say at all while pretentiously acting like it does. All of this going back to that terrible twist in Third Son from Metal Gear Solid 4 as Peace Walker just continues that spiral into the abyss as we pretend MGS3 was all planned and predestined from the start. Using this as a way of justifying MGS4, turning Metal Gear Solid into a beast not even remotely resembling what it once was. I love the charming simplicity of Metal Gear 1. I love the ambition of Metal Gear 2. I love the atmosphere of Metal Gear Solid. I love the commentary of Metal Gear Solid 2. I love the complexity of the gameplay of Metal Gear Solid 3. I love the production values of the Twin Snakes. I love the interesting story of Portable Ops. I love the emotions of Metal Gear Solid 4. Those things and many, many more great qualities in each and every game I just listed. But Peace Walker offers me nothing but boredom leading to exhaustion. A maddening story with mechanics that get expanded on much more in the Phantom Pain, leaving Peace Walker with nothing. Working on this video made me miss Metal Gear Solid 4. That was literally one video ago, and I appreciate the good qualities in that game I already had since Peace Walker completely dropped the ball. This franchise needs a fresh start.